All right, recording in progress. Okay. So welcome everybody. This is part of the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin's safety series being presented by their education committee. Thank you so much for attending. I'm very excited to share this information with you. And at the end, I do have also my email address, so you can contact me directly if you have any questions that you're not comfortable sharing. This is recorded, as I mentioned before recording it, which sounds odd to do. And so that we can share with people that may not be able to attend or have some last minute conflicts. And we will we'll jump into it. So my name is Molly Naef. I am a doctor of nursing practice and a registered nurse by trade, but the most important letters after my name, there's tons of them, and I cut some off actually, is autism mom. And that's what I'm here about. I am the mother of a child on the autism spectrum. I'm also the mother of a child off of the autism spectrum. That's how the kids refer to it in our house. You're on or off. And so this is work that I began as I was trying to keep my own son safe. And I struggled with trying to find resources that I'm a science dork, that were science-based, that I could see were proven to help make my child safer, and with resources that I could trust and references. And so I did it for myself, and then met others along our journey that also needed help in this area. And so I decided to do more. And that was then the focus of my doctorate. And I can't get the slides to, there we go. So I always start all of my talks with a couple of disclaimers, just so that we have some ground rules. Disclaimer or ground rule number one is absolutely nothing is off limits for me. I share, especially in these, especially to other parents, any little detail of my autism journey, and nothing is too uncomfortable for me to talk about. So please don't feel uncomfortable asking me. Place it in the chat if you don't want it. I won't share your name if it's uncomfortable, or email me afterwards, but there is seriously nothing off limits. I've talked about some of the grossest behaviors and some of the most enduring behaviors, and things that are just amazing and happy, and things that are sad. So nothing's off limits, nothing embarrasses me, nothing offends me, I think is the other thing to keep in mind. One of my basic core beliefs is that every single child, every single person is truly unique, whether they be on or off the autism spectrum. And so as we talk about kids and people, I think one of the things that is very core to everything that I believe is that we have to really make care for people very individualized. We have to really think about the person and the function of the behavior, what they need that behavior for, and what behaviors we really want to try to reduce or eliminate. But we also have to understand that there's no cookie cutter way to keep everybody safe, right? We have to think about what each person needs. So there's a lot of information that's coming at you, a lot of different interventions, and we'll talk through them, and we can talk through some different scenarios. But just remember, everybody's very unique. What I'm going to present to you is what scientific studies have shown to make people safer. But I think it's often where we have to really take the individual into perspective. It's also important for everyone to understand that the behaviors we're going to talk about today are also incredibly common for children without a diagnosis, without any diagnosis. Kids have different behaviors, adults have different behaviors. I wish I would say that when we talk about aggression that adults don't have it, but they do. And so it's important to understand that this information can be applied to people without a diagnosis. Nothing that I'm going to recommend today should ever replace sound therapies that you have chosen for your child. You've decided what is appropriate for your child, and nothing in here is going to just magically allow you to quit those. And I want you to make sure that when you talk about enacting interventions or trying new things, that you're also talking with the therapists or the providers that you have in your life already. And the final one is we in our home happen to use people first language at our current state and time. I point it out because I often then present in people first language because it's what I'm used to. And I don't want people to be offended. If you prefer, a different form of language, if you would like me to refer to you or your child as an autistic child or an autistic, I'm going to try my very best. In our house, the reason we use people first language is it's what my son currently identifies with. And that language will probably change. And so I just like to get it out there so that people understand why I'm using a specific language. Today, what I want to get to talk about is self-injurious versus repetitive behaviors. We're also going to talk about aggression during that time point, some reduction strategies, and then some overall safety strategies. I mentioned it again before the recording started. Why do I say all the important things before I record? This is going to be interactive. If you have questions or things that pop up while we're talking, feel free to interrupt. Feel free to pop something into the chat. And I can always go back slides too and go back in time and talk about things. So if something's coming up that's very pertinent or time sensitive, please feel free to interrupt. It will, again, I'm impossible to offend. So behaviors. Self-injurious behaviors are defined as behaviors that a person inflicts on themselves and that can cause injury. I think it's important to note that when you're talking about self-injurious behaviors, it is not always the intent of the person to injure themselves. It is not always the intent of the person to cause pain, but these behaviors inherently can cause injury. This behavior is seen in about 50% of people on the autism spectrum. It is not a core symptom of autism. Not everybody with autism injures themselves. This is often seen, people will describe head butting, head banging, biting of themselves, picking of their own skin, punching of themselves. Those are all self-injurious behaviors, injuries inflicted upon themselves. Some of these can lead to substantial injury if not addressed, but not all do. I mean, I know I've had people that have come into my life that they pick their cuticles until they bleed. That's self-injurious behavior, right? Lots of people do that though. It's not intended to cause them pain, but it is technically a self-injurious behavior. Is it going to lead to significant substantial injury? Probably not. Is it something we should do? Probably not. It's also it's me. I'm the one that does it. So we have, again, it's something that can be in anybody on or off the spectrum. Repetitive behaviors are a core symptom of autism. And they are commonly referred to as stims or tics, and they may very well be benign. These behaviors are not inherently unsafe. They're not done with the purpose of causing any type of injury or inflicted on themselves in a purposeful manner. But some of them can actually lead to some harm. Repetitive action on any motor or joint can over time cause issue. But the repetitive behaviors that are more concerning to me are those that can cause skin breakdown, or those that are done without awareness of the environment. So the one I bring up often is my son occasionally has a repetitive lip licking behavior, and he licks and licks and licks until they're cracked and bleeding, and they're open for infection, and they can cause some significant problems. Repetitive behaviors, rocking behaviors that can occur, inherently not unsafe, but if the rocking behavior occurs while they're at a very high surface or other place where they could fall, and that's where it could potentially be dangerous. But repetitive behaviors are not necessarily something of concern, and they very well may be benign and have a significant calming function or sensory function or a purpose. They may be communicative in nature as well. So those ones I want us to think about as from a safety perspective is it necessary to reduce or eliminate that behavior if it serves a function of providing comfort or calming or sensory output. So the final one is aggression. Aggression is a behavior that is inflicted on another person and can cause injury. These are also called tantrums or fits or whatever other term we want to talk about for that embarrassing time that somebody's hit us or done something to us. And again, aggression occurs unfortunately all over society, but aggression, as with self-injurious behavior, we want to focus on prevention of injury as much as we want to talk about reducing that behavior. I want people safe, but ideally, we do want behaviors that cause injury or harm to be reduced. Prevention strategies, to be honest, when I did research in this area, my focus was on home safety interventions that can be done by the parent. And so I had to eliminate everything that required therapy or, a professional license or, to have an advanced degree, because it's not helpful for me to tell parents to do things that they don't have the training or the education to do. Not all of us, I'm certainly not a therapist, so I don't have any of that type of training either. So it's important when we talk about this again, that if you have therapies in place, talk to the therapist that you have, talk to the providers that you have about the troubling concern, and see if there's anything within their purview that is appropriate that can be tried with regards to some of these challenging behaviors. So please engage those providers that you have. Oftentimes what they will do is they will try to identify the function of the behavior. Behavior is communication. We behave in a way to communicate to other people around us. And so one thing that they do is they gather more information from you about the behavior. You become the scientist, you become the data gatherer, right? And so they want to know more about what is the problem behavior. Is it hitting? What happened right before the hitting behavior started? That's the antecedent, or the ABC. The antecedent is right before the behavior occurred. Is it a trigger? Is it a sensory input? Is it a change in routine? Those are the antecedents. Then B is the behavior. The behavior itself, in this instance that I'm using as a point of reference, is hitting. How long did it last? Was it severe? Was it, a slight push? Was it a punch? Did it inflict any harm? Get a little bit more information on how long did it go on as well. And then finally, C is the consequence. Consequence sounds like a bad word, and sometimes it is. So a consequence is something that you can give to somebody. You can give a timeout. You can take away a preferred toy. You can do something that says this was wrong. Or a consequence can be a natural consequence. It could be an injury that occurs because of the behavior. So not all consequences are inflicted by another person as well. So when they get additional information on the behaviors that occur over time, therapists and other providers can look at, maybe there's triggers that they can identify, and we can work on reducing triggers, make that person more comfortable, more safe, more secure, so that the behavior doesn't occur. Maybe there's a reason. The consequence might be what they're seeking out. The consequence is mom pays attention to me, and maybe they're just seeking that out. There's no antecedent pattern that we can look at, but behavior always leads to mom coming in and offering a hug, or mom coming in and offering me alone time or talking to me. And so it might be that the behavior is to seek out that communication. So they look at that over time, and then look at how they can reduce the unsafe matter of the behavior and still get maybe the enjoyed consequence, or how we can reduce that antecedent in the front half. And so those are some prevention strategies that go into place. And again, those are things that you want to talk to your therapists or the providers that you have in your life that can help really get into that data and pull out some strategies for reducing. Well, what can we do at home? Oh, I just realized the whole screen didn't pop up. So there are a number of different strategies that do not require that you have licenses or be professionals or be expertly trained. And most of these are behavioral strategies. Modeling is a very simple behavioral strategy that is effective. Modeling means a number of things. Essentially what it is showing the correct behavior in some way. I show how I want somebody else to act and hope that they act in that way. And this is used all the time in education in ways that we don't even realize. But when we share or share movies or stories in which a character acts in a certain way, and we're trying to teach our child or other, anybody really about a preferred way of acting, that's modeling. Social stories are another really great way to do that. Social stories are specific about a behavior. Maybe you talk about how biting makes people sad, biting hurts, and that it's really specific about that biting behavior. But it could also be a standard book that's out there. I'm thinking there's this adorable book called No Bunny's Perfect. that we used to read to the kids when they were little. And it was these bunnies that have really bad behavior. They spill their milk and they bite their friends and they do all those things. And you say nobody's perfect. We all act up, we all get frustrated at times, we all have bad behaviors. But what are the good behaviors we can do? We can bite carrots instead of friends. That's all modeling, essentially trying to show the right behavior. It can be taken a step further, and we can really break down the steps of a preferred activity. It's less effective for something like a repetitive behavior or for an aggressive behavior or for a self-injurious behavior. It's really more appropriate for those stepwise. We come home from school, we place our backpack on the hook, we pull our water bottle out and wash it. So really breaking down steps and teaching each part of that individual step is maybe less effective unless we're talking about we've identified a trigger or cause to that behavior, and we can start to model how to prevent that. If it's, the act of coming in and my backpack doesn't always go on the hook and I get really frustrated and I bite myself, maybe we talk about how can we lift the backpack up? What's a great way to do that? Or can we eliminate the hook altogether and have it be a stool or something like that? So that might be a time when breaking down the steps is helping. Teaching and practicing, showing that at the end of the day, I didn't hit, I'm not a hitter, and that's also modeling. Well, other things you can do is talk about soft touches to a person or a pet. We don't hit, we use soft touches and show what a soft touch feels like. And then you can use videos as well. Like I mentioned, movies are a great way of showing those things, but you can make short videos showing somebody appropriately hugging or appropriately touching. But basically, you're just trying to teach appropriate versus inappropriate touch with modeling. Visual and verbal cues are just what they sound like, talking and showing. Visual cues, you can see the stop sign up there. A stop sign can be held up when a behavior, a self-injurious behavior is being done. It's more effective for kids that may not respond to verbal cues, but hey, stop, we don't want to hit, we don't want to bite. You can use color codes, red and green for stop and go as well. Red when they're doing a behavior that we're not looking for, hitting or biting. Green when they're doing great behavior. We do want to show we appreciate this behavior. This is hugging, this is play, this is fun, we're reading a book, everything's great. So you can use color codes as well. And then one of the other things I encourage often is making it very clear that this is an expectation, this is a rule, and do those together. Come up with home rules as a family. We respect each other in this house, so we don't want any hitting or kicking. And then you can post those house rules. That's a visual right there where we write out our house rules. Our house rules are we don't hit, we don't kick, we don't bite, we don't cuss. And if need be, you can make pictures that have the big red circle crossed out, a picture of somebody hitting, so that we have those house rules very clear. Because if they're not clearly a rule, why do we follow them, right? So that's another opportunity to use a visual cue. Verbal cues in this instance are pretty simple. I mean, we're trying to get the behavior to stop, so we're saying no. We're maybe signing with no. We're saying, ouch, that hurts. We're giving an indication that the behavior is something that's not desirable. And again, it's those ones that we're really focusing on are those that can cause injury. So verbal cues are pretty simple in this aspect and can be used along with modeling to show the appropriate behavior. Blocking is any time that you physically stop a person from being able to do something. Be honest with self-injurious behaviors, oftentimes this is going to come down to the next measure, which is protective measures. If you hold a person from doing something that's blocking, I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest, but technically it's blocking if you stop their hand in front of your face from hitting you. Blocking is not a strategy that I overwhelmingly recommend for self-injurious behaviors unless we're talking about specific protective measures, which we'll get to in a moment. Then again, when I pick apart an individual behavior, there are times when blocking can be appropriate. When my son hits, it's oftentimes in the bathroom when people are alone and they can't back out away from him. They can't get away from the hitting. And so one blocking measure that I have offered to them, and it's actually more of competing stimulus, which we'll get to in a moment, is to place a rubber ball between them and him. He's no longer able to do the action of hitting them, which is technically blocking, but he also has a competing stimulus. He gets to hit something that's okay to hit. And so we'll talk about competing stimulus in a moment, because it's actually one of my favorites. Praise and reinforcement. When kids are doing something great, we should tell them. And I don't think I do it often enough. I know I don't. But when we're seeing great behavior and we're loving it, we should really be happy. We should probably do it for everybody. I went through the entire day without hitting today, which is great too. I do it most days, but to be honest, I think that it's something that we should be praising our kids for if it is a challenging behavior for them. Reinforcement goes both ways. Reinforcement is positive and reinforcement is negative. Let's talk about positive first. Positive reinforcement is praise. It is telling somebody that they're doing a great job, and we should do it often. It's also reward charts. If they can go an hour without hitting, depending on how extreme or frequent the behavior is. If they can go a day, can they earn a sticker on a reward chart, and at the end of a week earn a prize? It depends on how frequent the behavior is and how long the child can receive reward from that. But can we at the end of the day say, even if it's on a chore chart, if they have specific chores to throughout the day, and they also get a reward for not biting themselves. I think that's a great way to do positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is a little bit more challenging for me, I'll be honest, because it doesn't always seem to be effective in our house, but I know scientifically that is effective. Timeouts, the removal of highly favored items are common measures that we all use. Taking away TV time, or taking away a favorite toy for a period of time, or timeouts, age appropriate and time appropriate. Those are all negative reinforcers. One word of caution, again, is sometimes these negative reinforcers, because they're not something that's wanted, when a child is already potentially upset about something, and that might be the cause of their behavior, may escalate things. It may have the opposite benefit of what you're doing. Then again, if the behavior is unsafe and you do need to remove them from an unsafe situation, that could also be a negative reinforcement as well. So it's something to consider, but it's something to also consider with caution, is that, are we causing this injurious behavior, or this aggression to be carried out unnecessarily because we're choosing negative reinforcement as our home strategy. Protective measures. These are fun. These are challenging because they have to be so highly individualized to the behavior and to the person who is being inflicted upon. And by protective measure, I mean anything that you can wear or do to protect the person from being injured. If it's aggression, it's something that you would wear on your body to protect you from being injured. If it's self-injurious, it's something that you would encourage the wearing of to prevent injury to the child. Some of these I think are fine to do without consulting additional personnel, but some things that are restrictive in nature, I do want people to talk to their healthcare providers about. So a child that picks skin repeatedly until it bleeds can be encouraged to wear long gloves, right? That's a protective measure, something that we're encouraging them to wear to prevent them from skin picking. The fantastic thing about protective measures is that the literature really does support that these are temporary. They don't always have to wear gloves. Eventually, the behavior is they're no longer getting what they want out of it. And so they do eventually stop. I have seen some studies of kids that have significant punching behaviors that are splinted, an arm splint that holds their arm straight and doesn't allow them to hit. But again, only during the times when they're engaging in that behavior, and only temporarily, and only my recommendation when we're talking about something restrictive is only when a physician really understands and helps and recommends that. Again, the withholding of that arm movement can be troublesome too, and I don't like the idea of restricting movement, but if the injuries are severe enough, you do want to protect people. Protective measures for yourself are also important. I know my son's doing it lately, but I've talked to families where there's a significant amount of scratching or pinching or grabbing of the neck. And so high turtlenecks don't offer a ton, but if you're talking about just scratching or pinching behavior, that might be helpful. But realistically, if it's occurring during a time that you can identify and be aware of, diaper changes, feedings, other times, you can wear a soft collar and protect yourself from those injuries. And also because they're not then getting that benefit, it may just eliminate the behavior as well. Kids that kick in the shins, little shin guards underneath your pants, they don't even know you're wearing them, but the injury to you is significantly less. You can still call out and let them know it hurts, let them know you don't want it, but you're going to have significantly less bruises. And so the real point of these protective measures is temporarily reducing the risk of more severe injury. That being said, I shouldn't say never. I very, very, very rarely recommend helmets. People come to me a lot asking me about helmets for kids that headbang. Oftentimes a headbanging behavior is on another person. And I'll be honest, I think a helmet sounds like it's going to hurt a whole lot more than a head. The other concern I have is that if this is not an appropriately fitting helmet, are we offering that safety? Potentially something like a bike helmet might be effective if the child is headbutting against a wall or other things. But again, these items, these helmets are not designed for the purpose of a person inflicting specific injury on themselves. They're designed for sports, for a fall from a bike. Can they protect and be safe in those measures? I haven't found any scientific studies that I have been able to find that support the use of helmets for this purpose, because they're really truly designed for a very different purpose. Competing stimulus is my favorite, because this is where we get to get really creative. All right. This is where we get to offer, before it's a problem, essentially a reward, and it can be fun. So competing stimulus is when you offer a similar sensory experience to the behavior in an attempt to reduce that behavior. So this is especially helpful if the child, we don't have really a sign of why they're doing it, we're not entirely sure, or it appears at multiple time points. Maybe they're seeking out the sensory input that this behavior is offering. And this is an effective behavior for things that aren't necessarily injurious to fecal smearing, other things. You can offer something called competing stimulus. Essentially, you want to find something as true to the behavior, to the behavior that they're wanting to do, the self-injurious behavior, as you possibly can. So kids that bite can be offered chews. I put this Jeffrey giraffe thing on. I was looking for a better picture of chews, but this one is actually kind of soft and almost skin-like. The other thing I have seen and thought was really helpful is some of the more sturdier built stress balls that you can squeeze that do stimulate that skin feeling. I joke, but I do this. When a child exhibits a behavior that's injurious, I actually do it on myself to try to figure out what it feels like, and then to try to find this competing stimulus. And again, maybe it's why it's so much fun for me, but okay, that feels harder than than putty. I'm not going to be able to bite like a chewable putty or a salt dough, but it's softer than a lot of the teething rings or other items. And so what can I find that's similar to it? So that Jeffrey giraffe was pretty, I don't even know if his name is Jeffrey, to be honest. Kids that pick, can they pick glue or paint off of a surface? I did have, I've known a couple families where the kids specifically pick from wall surfaces. And so those are a little textured, right? And so are they seeking out that input underneath their fingernails of not just the paint removal, but also of that texture? And so could you do it on a cutting board? Could you put tacky glue on a cutting board and allow them to pick that off? If it's skin picking, could you allow them to peel glue off of their own skin? Again, a lot of these are really require supervision, especially if kids eat non-food items. But is there something that you can offer that's very similar? And again, that's why I talk about the ball, bringing a rubber ball into the bathroom when my son wants to hit. Oftentimes at home, if he wants to hit, I have the couch or a yoga ball too, that I'll wheel the yoga ball in front of him when I can see that he's getting upset and he can hit that yoga ball. And I feel more confident. Nobody's going to get hurt, right? You're going to bounce right off of that. But pulling that rubber ball in, he's still getting that act. We can still talk about how hitting is bad, but nobody's getting hurt in the meantime. Competing stimulus works well if the child is seeking this behavior out multiple times a day. Offer it multiple times a day. Can we pick glue multiple times a day? Can we have that chew available? Can we do some Play-Doh time rather than fecal smear multiple times a day to try to provide the sensory input that someone is seeking and reduce that behavior that could cause some injury? It's a fun one, but again, it's very specific to the behavior. You have to find something that's very similar. And so, like I said, it sounds weird, but I do the behavior myself. What does it feel like to hit a person? It kind of feels like hitting a ball. I'm going to get a ball. So that's where I kind of like that strategy too, because then it's fun too. We're offering a fun behavior to reduce or eliminate a challenging behavior. Sensory challenges, I do want to touch upon it. Sensory differences are not inherently dangerous themselves, but may be a trigger for some challenging behaviors. If a child is very sensitive to sound or noise and you're bringing them to a noisy area and you're noticing all the tantrums are occurring in that noisy area, what measures can you do to reduce the noise level to make it more comfortable for the child? I mean, you can completely eliminate kids from noisy spaces. It's noisy everywhere, I've noticed, and I don't know if it's lockdown that makes me more sensitive to noise, but everything's noisy to me. But for my son, it's the echoed noises. So crowds don't necessarily bother him, places don't necessarily bother him, but the certain acoustics of rooms do. And so I can't always know, like if I go somewhere, if it's going to be too echoey. Headphones, earmuffs, headphones that play noise or music. Interestingly enough, studies show each of them are equally the same. So whatever's most comfortable. The word of caution I have for earmuffs or headphones with music or other things is to be cognizant of the location that you're in. If you're in a very crowded place and you need someone to hear you call out their name, or if you're in traffic, or if they're in school, consider how much noise they're blocking out. You want enough to make them more comfortable, but not enough that they're not able to safely hear when traffic is coming or otherwise. If it's really light or other things, can they wear a hat and shield some light? Can they wear sunglasses and shield some of that? Realistically giving some type of protection for the child for what's causing anxiety or what's causing stress from a sensory challenge. And then finally, regulation, offering them breaks from those sensory differences or challenges entirely. Removing them from that loud room whenever you're able to, and allowing them some break and some time to just, unwind and feel more comfortable again. Communication, I say this at the end of most of my sessions, but one of the things I think is really important is really making sure that you're overly communicating with everybody that's involved that can be in your life about these challenging behaviors. It helps nobody if you drop your child off at a daycare and you never tell them that they've hit at home, even if they've never hit outside the home. They start to have that hitting behavior or the biting behavior, other things, they have no idea how to address it or how to deal with it. And so I think it's really important that when we have behaviors, especially behaviors that can cause injury or can make somebody unsafe, that we're communicating. You have a plan for handing off, especially during times of challenge, during times of tantrums or meltdowns or whatever you like to call them, making sure that if you need a break, you're clearly communicating to whoever's taking over. They're circling communication and letting you know that, yes, they are now taking over. But making sure that you are communicating with everybody. I'm a big fan, to be honest, of contacting police departments before there's a problem. My child has a behavior that could lead to aggression or injury of himself. I would rather that people know that that is a behavior that he has, then respond to that behavior when they see it. If my son is out in public and he starts to injure himself, I don't want him to be injured more because someone reacts poorly to it. So I have safety plans with our local police department, share with them any triggers any signs that he's going to show aggression, so that, and then signs for how to reduce and eliminate that. We have an excellent program in McFarland. Our police department is amazing and updates it annually. But one of the things they know is that he is like facial tension and neck tension right before he's about to hit. And he announces with the word ow. And right after he says ow, you're going to get hit. So back up, it's coming. But they also know that he loves Monsters Incorporated and that he likes to have his shoulders pressed firmly. And so they know measures to calm him appropriately. And so that's where I say communication is very helpful. Oh, there's a big weird line right in the middle of this, but resources that you have to go to Children's Long-Term Support Waiver. Your case manager can help if you do have that service. Get any items that you need to help with calming, any items that you need to help with protection. Again, those that require, that restrict movement, they are gonna make you talk to your doctor first as well, because nobody wants to restrict any type of movement like that. And then the regional centers for children and youth with special healthcare needs. I love providing their information. They're fantastic, they're amazing, they help everybody. And you can call them yourselves, your providers can call them for other recommendations or ideas. They're absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough about them, and they're in, again, regionally located throughout the state of Wisconsin. So they're a fantastic resource. And then finally, I'm available. If you have any questions, anything that's uncomfortable to talk about here, I have contact information I share it every time. Use it. I have no problem if you have a challenging behavior, something that you want to talk through and you're not really sure. If you want to play around with competing stimulus, I think it's like the funnest thing. I'm always available. And with that, this is the end. And I actually went longer than I thought, to be honest. But any questions about any of this information, I'm going to figure out how to stop the recording.